How many times has a goal, a plan, or a capital expenditure venture has not been completed for failure to remain within the scope of the original plan? How many resources have been depleted, and how much of personnel's time and talents have been clearly exhausted when you or your company has derailed from the scope of the project? If you are an entrepreneur who is starting a project and has a defined scope, but suddenly you stop abruptly to work on another project and possibly another project, and you never stick to that original plan, you will definitely not achieve that goal. If you're seeking a love relationship with someone, and you go out with this individual, then that individual, and suddenly you go out with this other individual and that other individual, it is possible that you have never defined what it is you're seeking for in a relationship. In other words, you have deviated from the scope of your love relationship. It is very sad to say, but in every business, in every church, in every for-profit or non-profit organization, companies have failed to remain within their predetermined and agreed-upon project goals. They fail to remain within their tasks. They fail to remain within their expected deliverables and anticipated deadlines. Folks, I have to be very realistic and inform you that when you get sidetracked in other plausible gains, you will lose people's confidence. You will lose corporate's confidence. You will lose credibility, and people will begin to question whether or not you can deliver on the initial project. When you digress from the project scope, you will lose money, labor hours, machine OEE or process OEE, and team members' belief in the project altogether. Operating out of the scope of the project plan and deviating from the project scope is very dangerous. So today I want to speak to you on how to define your scope and how to align every resources toward your scope. Your project scope statement is supposed to bring into alignment all capital expenses, all personnel efforts, and all activities towards the predetermined desired outcome. Failure to do so will result in low morale and, far worse, shareholders' distrust of any future company project. So let's look into this very important scope analysis and how it can help you with your goals, your relationships, and your personal endeavors. The word scope is defined as the extent or range of view. It is the outlook of an application or an operation. In plain English, a scope is what you're aiming for. Your scope is the target you're aiming at, and this is also true for all your relationships. This also means that the sum total of all your activities, the sum total of all your efforts, and the sum total of all your investments, and when I mean by investments, I also mean time invested, all of these must aim toward achieving the intended target. In business, the scope is an integral part of the project plan, where companies allocate cross-functional resources in order to acquire an asset, create and or modify a process or a product. All the requirements to fulfill the needs of the scope is prioritized and therefore sponsored so that the return on investment can be obtained. There are some very distinctive features of a scope that I want to share with you so you can have further clarity of what I'm referring to. First of all, scopes are time sensitive. This means that you have to be aware that your scope has an agreed upon start date and a projected end date. If you are a project manager, a continuous improvement leader, a Lean or Six Sigma black belt, or a Kaizen process officer, you have to know that your sponsor is expecting on-time deliverables. Secondly, scopes have a monetary value associated with it. When you allocate cross-functional team members to work on a project, you're actually paying them for the allocated time that they spend on that project. The sum total of all this time equates to a percent of money invested in that project. Another feature of a scope is that it involves external members. And in some occasions, these external members are also external interested parties. This statement leads me to inform you that external interested parties may be seeking a product, process, or service change. External interested parties may be seeking a financial compensation or a value stream modification. With all this said, let me provide you with a real-world example of what a project scope is and how people can deviate from a project scope. So let me provide you with a real-world scenario. Suppose a couple wants to build a home. Now, the couple has already determined that they are in need of a home and therefore have initiated a project to have a house built within 6 to 12 months. For this couple, the scope has already been clearly defined, which is to build a family home. All the requirements to build a home are going to be written or recorded in the project charter. This couple is going to work with a bank to finance the build, work out the mortgage terms, and credit rating requirements. They're going to save for the closing costs and have additional funds in their savings account in case it is needed in the near future. In their project plan, they're going to conduct research for a good builder. Here, they'll discuss the amount of square footage they need and whether or not they're going to have any upgrades. They're going to discuss the number of car garages they need, a single car garage or a double car garage. They're going to discuss whether it's going to be a custom home or a model home and how many bedrooms potentially the house may have. They also have to sit down with the builder to discuss the building terms in regard to how much time it is needed to build a home, in case there are other terrain factors or homeowners association requirements for that build. Sometimes the couple that's going to build a home has a lease agreement, and they have to ensure that the house is actually built before the lease contract expires. Finally, this couple has to perform a market survey to ensure that they know what county they're going to live in and what school districts their children, if any, will be attending. They also have to consider the distance between this new home and their current respective jobs. In summary, the sum total of all their task lists, the sum total of all their economic plans, the sum of all their investigation, the sum of all their time, and the sum of all their energy should remain focused on that scope. And you're asking me, what is the scope? Well, the scope is to build a family home. Now, suppose that during this project scope of building a home, one of the parties is interested in buying a car. They feel persuaded that they need a car. But let me ask you, is buying a car part of your scope? The answer is definitely a resounding no. As we all know, purchasing a car is yet another project with another unique scope. Whereas you need to know what make and model you want to buy, what is the budget, when do you want to buy the vehicle, and what are the terms of the loan. Going back to the previous example, building the family home is time sensitive. So why would you want to spend time, energy, and resources in buying a car when your project scope is clearly aimed at building a home? If you get sidetracked by buying a car, you may affect your credit rating, delay the house bill, and be forced to lease the home you're currently in for another 6 months. As simple as this sounds, businesses fall into the same trap of what I call scope dementia, whereas they start a project, then forget soon thereafter the scope of that original project. Their business or department memory is disrupted by other projects and scopes that have absolutely nothing to do with what they're currently working on. Unfortunately, companies, people, and corporations start working on a project with a very specific scope. And halfway through their action items, they begin to work on another project within another entirely different scope. Then halfway through this second or third or maybe even fourth project, they embark on another project with yet another detailed scope. The end result of this scope conundrum is that at the end of the year, nothing is accomplished. And you end up with loss of time, loss of product or process opportunities, loss of customer orders, loss of research and development funds, loss of capital, a frustrated team, and a group of nervous shareholders. So today I want to realign your thinking and how to remain focused on your scope, on your business, and on your project plan. The first thing you need to do in order to always remain focused on your scope is to conduct good research. You have to do that pre-homework work in order to gather all the information, create the Pareto charts, ask all the questions. Before you initiate a project and define its scope, you must first narrow down what it is that you're going to be working on or investing your time in. Notice that a project without a scope will fail, and a scope without a structured framework of a project plan will also fail. So in order to remain focused on the scope or target of the project, you must define what it is you're exactly pursuing. The second advice I want to give you is that you must be disciplined in remaining within the scope's lane. You may be tempted to pursue another item on your list, but you have to remain focused on the task at hand. Remember, if you pursue something outside of your scope, you have to occupy the same people, your assets, and resources to this new scope. So don't try to be a do-it-all, because you will definitely end up frustrated and without completing that project. The third advice I want to give you on how to remain focused on your scope is that if you are the champion of the project, periodically check with your project sponsor to confirm that all the actions still remain aimed at achieving that target. Hold meetings to ensure your cross-functional team has not deviated from their action item list. So now, just to recap on the importance of remaining focused on your scope, I must say that your scope must be very specific. So if you have another good idea that is outside of your scope, place it in the parking lot board and get back to it once your initial project and scope have been obtained. Second, be mindful of the employee or staff wanderers. What I mean by this is that there are people within your group that start to work on activities that are outside of your scope. So it is very imperative that you follow up and monitor with your team members' activities to ensure no one has wandered away from the expected deliverables. People can actually sleepwalk toward failure if you do not wake them up to the importance of your scope. Furthermore, your scope is always time sensitive. Don't end the year with unfinished projects. It is best to finish the quarter with one successful project than to end the year with 5 or 10 projects that have different scopes and different business requirements that were never completed. This is very sad to mention, but I have seen this time and time again in household, in for-profit organizations, in non-profit organizations, and far worse in business sectors. Now, I must admit that there are very specific times where during the project, the scope of the project must change. And when this occurs, let me just end by saying that I want to advise 3 things that if you have to change the scope of the project during the activities of that project, I would like for you to do the following. First of all, make sure you have a formal procedure or a process that is written to ensure that the team has ample opportunity to carefully review and approve all the changes. Secondly, you must identify the impacts of those changes to the scope of the project. And this is a great moment to create a risk and opportunities log. This is a great moment to create a contingency plan, because when you change the scope of the project, you must analyze the impacts of those changes toward your timeline, your resources, and your allocated assets. Finally, there must be a written communication plan and guidelines to inform all your shareholders or stakeholders of the project changes and its respected impacts toward their organizations. So let me end today simply by saying that you must remain focused on the task and that you cannot deviate from your project scope. In this season, you cannot deviate from achieving your goals and being so sidetracked by things that are outside of your field of view. Your expected target warrants that you focus all your time, your energy, and skills to the intended deliverable. You must remain encouraged, discipline and focus on those intended deliverables, that you have to evaluate all those action item lists to ensure that your team members, that your sponsor, all your internal and external resources are on board, so that at the end of the year, you can have all these projects closed and that you will have a great and insurmountable return on investment.